This here is the Vetroo K2. My wife thought it was a speaker. It's actually a PC case. And you guys told me to build in it.
Frequent travelers and especially public Wi-Fi users, listen up. If you aren't already using a virtual private network, strongly consider NordVPN, a leading VPN service. They provide secure and totally private tunnels for network traffic by masking your IP and browsing histories. And NordVPN in particular offers an unbeatable combination of impenetrable security, fast connection, and unlimited bandwidth. And it can all be done with just a single click. You can even work around location-dependent restrictions with it. For instance, I have to travel quite a bit out of country for work and even for family stuff. My wife's family all lives in Germany, so I'm there quite a bit, and a lot of my favorite TV shows I'm not technically supposed to watch in countries like Germany. At least, that's what the streaming services want you to think. See, with one click in NordVPN's app, I can tunnel back to the US, and it's as though I never even left. I can watch anything that I'm allowed to watch normally here in the States without issue. NordVPN has over 5,000 servers in 60 countries, so you've plenty to choose from depending on your circumstance for either your phone, tablet, or PC. So be sure to visit nordvpn.com/Greg Salazar. It's also linked at the top of this video's description, and you'll set yourself up with a 2-year plan plus an extra free month, and best of all, if you don't like it for whatever reason, which I doubt, but still, you have a 30-day money-back guarantee. It's peace of mind. Check it out now.
I'll be honest with you, I am not expecting very much from this one. It was $100. I bought it myself on Amazon. I don't have any prior relationship with this company. Not that it would matter. If something sucked, I'm gonna tell you that it sucked, all right? My reputation is way more important to me, my integrity on this channel, than keeping a single company happy. There are plenty of fish in the sea, and if Vetroo watches this video and decides they never want to work with me again, who cares? What they can't do is stop me from buying cases like these and giving my raw impressions across a video like this. So yeah, just going into it, this is just going to be a very... I'm going to be very blunt about my feelings here. That said, I could be completely surprised as well. Who really knows? All I know is that this thing looks super strange and that it only supports m-atx motherboards. So there is that fairly large constraint. Apart from that though, I mean, yeah. I think these product photos speak for themselves. And one thing I really didn't like is the fact that this case ships in a box with this sticker exposed to everybody. Like, this is literally how it showed up at my doorstep. And I'm not a fan of this because this kind of gives the impression that there's like a full-blown gaming PC inside of here. And in this day and age especially, and that's just asking for someone to steal it either at your doorstep or, you know, you'll have theft within whatever shipping company is handling this. It's not really the best look. So either put a box around this box, even though I'm not a fan of boxes and boxes, it would work here, or remove the sticker outright, especially with a picture, and just stick to a very basic brand logo and then maybe like a, I don't know, a small description of the case, K2. It's a very simple name. Another important note about the K2 is that it comes with a 200mm fan up front. I'll be honest with you, airflow doesn't look all that terrible. I mean, yes, obviously having a very large fan is advantageous in a number of ways. It will run quieter. It can displace a similar amount of air as, say, a 120 or 140 mil that's operating at a much higher RPM, right? So you get a much quieter operation and still great airflow, great CFM. So that's good. It's also RGB capable if that matters to you. But again, I just can't really get around the shape of this thing. I have literally the entire front, if you want to call it the front, of this cylinder is the 200mm fan. Some might think it's cool. It's just not really my cup of tea. I don't know. Maybe it'll change once I can actually see it in person. So let's take it out of the box. I'm also curious how they package this thing, considering it is, again, a cylinder, not your traditional PC case shape. Oh, okay. That's actually pretty cool. So we've got styrofoam cut out to fit the shape of the case. That's a good thing. Let's see what we're working with. Wow, this looks even weirder in person. Just look at that. I mean, this is such a polarizing look. I don't know. I think I actually think it's kind of dope. I'm not gonna lie. It reminds me of like an oversized like Mac trash can. You know what I'm talking about? Like those old like Apple Macs or whatever they were called. I mean, if we just turn this up on its side, oh yeah. That's a trash can right there. So let's take care of this plastic peel. Ooh, wow. I wonder, is this? Nope, it's acrylic. Yep, that's what I thought. You're paying $100 for acrylic, folks. Granted, it is curvy, so there's that. That'd be probably pretty difficult to do with tempered glass, but yeah. Up front here, now this feels like glass. So there's that. Okay, so we've at least got, you know, some tempered glass here. Again, $100 case, just remember that. Now let's see, to get the top panel off, if you want to call it that, remove 2 thumb screws at the rear, and this just slides off. Look at that. So your motherboard actually sits right here. You can, it looks like, mount an AIO up top. This little, wow, this feels kind of flimsy, this bracket up here. You've got your 200mm fan up front, and then you put your power supply underneath your motherboard. It works. It looks like it works. I don't know. Let's start building in it. So we've got our micro ATX motherboard here, a B550 Tough Gaming from ASUS, and we've got our CPU of choice, a trusty Ryzen 5 3600X. We're gonna raise the retention arm here and drop the CPU on in. Easy as that. Retention arm back down. We've got our 512 gig NVMe from Team Group and a pretty sweet 16 gig kit of Corsair DOM Plats. In you go with NVMe's. It is so simple. Tighten her on down. And now for memory, slots A2 and B2. Yeah, thermal paste, cooler. Now our entire platform is ready to go. Let's get the rear IO shield installed. Wow, that actually went in much easier than I thought. Tolerances here, not as tight. Now it's time for the merge. Line everything up. Seems like it's sitting nicely there. I just realized we're missing a few standoffs. I hate it when that happens. So I only got 1 extra standoff in the bag. There should be at least 2 extras because I've got one up top here that is not being filled now. But anyway, not the end of the world. And now the motherboard is installed. Again, you can see here with this AMD cooler, plenty of breathing room. In fact, when we reinstall this bracket, this way, this is how it goes, I think. Maybe, maybe not. No, it's this way. Wait, which way does it? No, it goes this way. Okay, yeah. Ooh, oh God, okay. So yeah, something like this. You can see actually the case. Might as well show you this now. It's a bit all loosey-goosey, and that's because it actually relies on this bracket, this fan slash AIO bracket, for a bit of stability, which I'm not really a huge fan of because it makes things wobbly in the interim. But anyway, yeah, that's not a ton of clearance. So installing a Hyper 212, Hyper 212 Evo, something equivalent to that, you might not even be able to get this installed. Not that it will matter, because there's no way you're fitting fans with a tower cooler like that anyway. The unit says max CPU height clearance of 165mm, and would you look at that, 159 for the height of a Hyper 212 Evo. That is cutting it super close. Definitely wouldn't be able to fit fans in that top little bracket if you have one of these installed. We'll take care of some basic wiring here. I'm not sure how we're gonna cable manage all this, but we'll figure it out. I've done just a bit of cable management here, just with these smaller cables again, because well, I imagine it's gonna get a bit messier. I don't usually cable manage this early, especially when the PSU's not in here, but yeah, I mean, I guess you could just wrap the cables around the underside of the motherboard tray, but I kind of wanted everything to be a bit streamlined, and then we can hide stuff over here. The graphics card, of course, is gonna be sitting in these 2 slots, so it might actually interfere with the shroud. I'm not entirely sure there. Didn't think that one through. Just another thing you gotta deal with in a case like this. So let's see, this here is an RTX 2070 Super from Gigabyte. Just gonna slot it in here. I mean, I think that works. It's all a bit bent. Again, this frame is just a bit flimsy. But yeah, I think that the cables clear it nicely. Some other cards, maybe not so much. You might need to route things underneath. Now, next on the agenda here is the power supply, and you can see it sits right here again under the motherboard tray. I'm assuming we just have to like slide it on in, and it doesn't look like it's going to support too long a unit because you do have this hard disk drive tray thing here, and it is riveted to the case, so there's no easy way to remove it unless you wanted to drill through it. And even then, I think this would compromise the structural integrity of the chassis because this looks like it supports the entire motherboard tray above it. So you probably don't want to remove that. So no long power supplies, I'll say that. I'm also finding it a bit difficult to like get good shots of this case. I think it's just because of the shape of it. I feel like I'm not really doing it justice by filming it from the angles that I am. There's really no good angle of this case because again, it's round, so it's just weird. And with a standard PSU length ATX form factor, you can see how much space we have left to work with here. So maybe another inch further back. You can just use this model for reference. I'll have it in the description, and that'll be it for this case. Now, something I just discovered: this 200mm fan up front, the only one that you get in the K2, mind you, is powered by m-atx. And that appears to be literally the only way to power this fan. You cannot plug it directly into your motherboard, which means you cannot vary the voltage without some kind of weird adapter between these m-atx connections. So Not really a fan of that at all. Well, believe it or not, this build is basically finished already. We just need to put the side panels on. I will say, cable management, I had to make some pretty hefty compromises. It just, yeah, I mean, the 24 pin, you know, like I would like to hide that cable a bit more, but then you've got this mess to deal with back here. And there's really no sensible place to store additional cable length. So you kind of just have to stuff it in and around the hard drive cage. Now, if you're utilizing both hard drive bays, that's gonna pose a pretty big problem. You're just gonna have cables just kind of chilling in these little areas here between the cylinder walls. But I mean, all in all, like it's not the worst case in the world by any means. It's super freaking weird. It's probably the weirdest case I've built in just because of the shape of it all. But it's I mean, for $100, I mean, and then it just kills it with the 200mm fan having only m-atx power. There's no other way to power this fan. I think that in and of itself is a deal breaker. I mean, having a 200mm fan is like the selling point of a case like this, right? It can support a fan that large, but then you just kill it when you only power it with m-atx. So we're not going to be able to vary voltage, and we're not going to be able to control the RPM as a result of that. So anyway, let's get the side panels on, or whatever panels you call these. I guess they are on the sides of the cylinder, depending on how you're looking at it. And then we'll power it on, and we'll run a few just preliminary temperature tests just to see how detrimental this shape is. Pepsi, can you like give me some space? Thank you, girl. All right, I kind of forgot how to even reassemble this. It's I think it's this way, but then that would be on this side, so that makes it this panel piece, I'm assuming, and I'm assuming this piece goes like right here. I think we can sit it down on its feet, and then we can screw them in from the back. Yeah, a bit of a process, this one. Jesus, these two down here at the bottom, they aren't even threading in. The tolerances are a bit too loose for my liking in a $100 case. Come on, get in there. Another thing I just noticed, no dust filter for the power supply. That will be a problem long term, especially if you live in a dusty area. And lastly, this top acrylic piece, which just kind of sits there, and then we have to bend it a bit to get it screwed down to the case. Yeah, it's just a bit of a pain. Get in there. Alrighty, so yeah, something like this. Why is this so difficult? It should just... Yeah, this panel sucks. Come on. Okay, no, that's how it's, I feel like that's how it's supposed to sit right there, but it's not sliding all the way forward, so I give it a little bit of a love tap, like that right there. Okay. I also just realized there's no like perforated area here for breathing with the graphics card. You have these small little slits on the bottom, a few up top, but come on, just make it perforated. I mean, I know they wanted to make it kind of transparent for the aesthetic play, but you can't even see in here. This acrylic is like so tinted, like all you're gonna see are just some subtle RGB LEDs if you have any in your build. They also have these two buttons here on the side up front. Actually, one of them is a real button, and it's for the LEDs just to turn them on and off for the front fan. This other one is totally fake. It doesn't do anything. I'm not even sure why they bothered including it, because it doesn't really add anything to the build. So let's try to power this thing on. Just cross our fingers if we have no issues. Oh, that sounds awful. Okay. Yep, seeing as though we only have one fan in this build, aside from the CPU cooler, I'm just gonna default straight to checking the 200mm. I think there are a few cables that are hitting it, and again, there's just not many places to stow cables, so what can I do? All right, what cable? I see which one's clipping it. And what's ironic is that this is the RGB cable for that fan, and the way it was in the case, it just kind of sits right behind the frame. Now, while we're waiting for the system to start up, I noticed that the LEDs in the fan are actually only positioned in the middle, and they don't really diffuse well into the fins. So you really just get a bulk of bright lights here in the center, and really nothing on the outside. I don't really know how I feel about that. It's not what I expected. Now, part of the reason I'm disappointed with this is the fact that this fan in the picture on the box shows LEDs around the outside, around the frame of the fan itself, Whereas in our case, the LEDs are actually in the center, kind of radiating out. So there are way more LEDs in the picture than we're actually getting in real life, which I think is a bit of false advertising there. Now remember, there is this LED switch here to the left, which will cycle through a bunch of different presets for this fan. Unfortunately, there's no other way to change like the color or anything, so you just have to keep clicking this button all the way through until you find something that you like. I tend to just stick with white. It's a pretty neutral color, and I think this here is that. So you can see a bit more of the fan blades here. But I'm just not really a fan of like the blocky animations, you know, and the light's not really diffused all that well either. Now on to temperatures. What I've done is installed ida64 Engineer, which I've linked in this video description. These guys have been a big help to the channel. I appreciate them letting us use their software for stress test purposes here. You can see we've got the stress test going. This light blue line is our CPU temperature at the package. This red line is GPU diode temperature. This yellow line is motherboard temperature, although I don't expect this one to get too high. But you can see after running the stress test for only a couple of minutes, CPU temps are pretty darn toasty. 87 degrees is borderline uncomfortable for me. I wouldn't want this to be sustained long term. And we are just running it stock with DOCP enabled, so it's not like we're doing anything super crazy here. I'm sure you can hear to some extent that this mic does have noise cancellation. The CPU cooler fan is having to ramp up RPM a bit to compensate for the excess amount of heat being dumped into the cooler. We're coming up on 5 minutes here, which is not a long time to stress test a system, mind you, so I don't recommend just cutting it off at that. But what I want to do is remove this side panel while the benchmark or while the stress test is running, and we will see what happens to temperatures. I expect they'll dip a bit. There's a lot of heat in this case, and it doesn't feel like a ton of it is moving through and out the rear. It's not being exhausted very quickly. So I'm just going to take this off, and we're going to see what happens in this chart. And already we can see a huge reduction in graphics card temperatures. Look at that, drop down to 60. It'll probably continue into the 50s at this rate. And this is partly because the card is pushed so close to the edge of the frame. Again, we don't have any active ventilation in front of the shroud. And the large 200mm fan in the K2 isn't really blowing air in the graphics card's direction because of just where the card is positioned. You can see while things are running, that fan is pretty massive up front, but a lot of that air that's being pushed around the edges of the frame, because that's where the blades are largest, so they're displacing the most air around there. That air is kind of moving on top of the card, but it's not really moving in front of the shroud, which is where these fans are going to be pulling in that fresh air. So that's one of the reasons why we notice such a sharp decline in GPU temperatures. Not entirely sure why our CPU temps are as high as they are. Nonetheless, you can see they were continuing to climb with the top panel on, but with the top panel off, they seem to have leveled off here around 88, 89C. What I'm also going to do is run 30-minute tests with the panel on versus off for both the CPU and GPU, and we'll see how those compare as well. But I would say the K2 is probably not all that detrimental to CPU temps, assuming you're using a tower cooler or something that's going to be able to take advantage of that fresh air. But the graphics card is really going to suffer. I mean, look, our temperatures have continued to drop. We're now in the 50s, whereas before we were headed pretty prevalently into the 70s. So this is a pretty stark difference here. So, after building in and testing the K2 from Vetroo, how do I feel? Not so great about it. I don't recommend it. I'm just gonna be blunt. For $100, no way, not a chance. There are too many awkward compromises for this price. I mean, there are so many good cases in the $100 range, and even below that this is competing with. Maybe not from a form factor standpoint, but just from a price category perspective, you're competing with way too many good products out there, and this one is just not one of them. The tolerances are no good. The fan, I mean, the only fan you get is only powered by Molex. I mean, unless I'm missing a cable somewhere, you literally have to just stick with the stock RPM of this fan. And this thing would be awesome if you could bump it up just a bit, especially under load. I don't like the placement of the graphics card, nor how hot this thing gets. I think this is actually a pretty dangerous scenario for a card to be in. Cable management, there's a few other compromises I just don't like. For $100, no. I just can't in good conscience recommend this for this price. Maybe 50 or $60, like in the quirky kind of $50, $60 range, but double that? No way. There are way too many good cases out there. Now, if for whatever reason you enjoy difficulty, because that's pretty much what you're gonna run into here, cable management, just the awkwardness of this form factor, I will have it linked below. And for those sickos out there who just love getting their hands on products like these, I get it, spend your money how you want. But I would not personally buy this for a personal build of mine. You know, unless I had a client that specifically wanted this case, there's no way. And even then, I would still try to talk him or her out of it because I think that it is detrimental to pretty serious components. Other than that, though, hopefully you thought it was interesting seeing someone building this. I'm not sure if this is like a case that others have built in before on YouTube, but it's available. I just don't think you should buy it. I don't know what else. I don't know what else to say. It's that weird. With that, if you guys enjoyed this one, be sure to let me know by giving this one a thumbs up. That would be greatly appreciated. If you just love watching misery play out on camera and you have a recommendation for a crazy case you want to see us build in that's ideally not like several $100s. I don't want to buy like a $500 case, hate it, and then end up just like giving it away. Just to me, I'd rather stick in the $100 price range or below. So maybe you have like a super like dirt cheap case you want to see us build in, or a super weird shaped case like this one. Those recommendations would be appreciated in the comment section below. If for whatever reason you're not subscribed yet, click that red subscribe button, click that notification bell while you're at it, and stay tuned for the next one. My name is Greg. Thanks for building with me.